Thank you, Moderator Joseph, and express my appreciation to the other members of the panel for volunteering to service. Let me express my appreciation to the Citizens for Progress for this opportunity, and for all of the other members of the press and citizens of District 32 that are here. 55 years ago, a young baby boy was born. The baby boy was reared in a home that had a skylight before skylights became popular. That is the idea of having the tin roofs, and understood whether or not there were chickens underneath the house, not because they cackled, but because you could see them through the board. This same baby boy adopted a mentor by the name of Dr. Charles Edward Murray, the principal of C.E. Murray High School, who taught and instilled certain fundamental things. One was that people do according to their understanding. The other was that Mr. Common Sense ought to be in charge of our actions. And then one profound that has stuck with me, and that is we can ill afford to do too many inferior things, because that's what some have come to expect of us. That young boy would graduate from C.E. Murray High School, Voorhees College, and the University of Florida in 1987. In 1988, he was elected to become a member of the Williamsburg County School Board of Trustees and currently serves in the South Carolina House of Representatives. For the past 25 years, he's committed himself to becoming a servant leader, believing that Albert Einstein was correct when he indicated that only a life lived for others is a life worth living. We're in a position now to simply say that our life living has demonstrated that we've gone from the outhouse to the State House. We appreciate the opportunity to be a servant leader for our state and for our community. We welcome this opportunity to share with you as dictated by the questions from our panel. Thank you so much.
Mr. Anderson, your opening statement.
Good evening to all, to our moderator, to our panelists, and to the committee for this evening. Certainly, my name is Carl L. Anderson. I am a Georgetonian, and I would like to welcome all of you to the city of Georgetown, where I grew up as a little boy on the west end of Georgetown. My grandmother's from Williamsburg County, the Neesmith area. My grandfather was from the Reams area in Georgetown County. In the mid-50s, they moved to Georgetown City. And in 1961, this little boy was born. In 1979, I graduated from Howard High School as class president. In 1981, I graduated from Horry Georgetown Technical College as student government president. And in 1993, I graduated from the Christian Bible College and Seminary. Went back and got my master's degree from there. And I have been awarded the PhD from Francis Marion University. Growing up in the city of Georgetown, my grandfather helped lay the foundation for International Paper Company. I, growing up in Georgetown, saw when Georgetown Steel was being built. But most of all, I've been the little boy that started work in Williamsburg County. I plowed the field for one summer in the tobacco field. And because it was so hot and dry, I left there and I worked in Georgetown at a restaurant for a summer. Went to work at Myrtle Beach for the Shady Rest for a couple of summers. And then I landed at Big K in Georgetown. Afterwards, my family started a business, Anderson Furniture and Appliance, and we worked there for 20 years, serving the people of Georgetown, Williamsburg, Horry, Charleston, Berkeley County. And then I worked for Liberty Life Insurance Company for 7 years and 3 months. I have been in the legislation for 10 years, and I have my 10-year pin on now that I was awarded in May for my service to the South Carolina House of Representatives and the members of House District 103. I've also had the opportunity, and thank and praise God for the calling of pastoring for 22 years in the Palmetto, South Carolina Annual Conference.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Knight, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you first to the Citizens of Progress for putting on this debate. I believe it's much needed. Thank you all for traveling tonight to see us and to hear the issues. It's clear that democracy is alive and well in District 32 when we have participation from you all. My name's Caesar McKnight, and I'm the son of Edward and Ruby McKnight, and I grew up and was raised in Salter, South Carolina. I'm a 1992 graduate of Kingstree Senior High School. I'm a 1996 graduate of Morris Brown College. I proudly served my country in the United States Army Reserve for 8 years from 1991 until 1999 when I was honorably discharged. I currently practice law for myself at the law offices of Caesar McKnight in Lake City, South Carolina, and I've had my own practice since 2007. The question should be asked, why are you running? I'm running to finish in 14 what we started in 2012. I'm running because I have a vision of what's possible in our district and our state. Robert Kennedy once said that there are those that look at things the way they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Why can't we have communities that have the best schools? Why can't we provide our citizens with the basic services and functions so that they can raise their families and make life better for their children than it was for them? Why can't we have our communities where our senior citizens don't spend their golden years worried about their health and their next meal? Why can't we have communities where every person, regardless of their background, will get a fair shot at a better life? I'm running because I believe we can do better. I'm running because the old way of doing things has passed. There's heritage and there's things that we carry from our past that we need to keep. We're a tight-knit community. We're a hospitable and respectable people, and we need to remain that. But I'm running to bring us into the 21st century and make the changes that we so desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates for your opening statements. Forum will begin now with questions. Again, we ask the candidates to please stay within the allotted 1 minute and 30 seconds for answers. We'll rise and stand at the podium with 10 seconds left. I don't know how effective that's going to be over there, but please peripherally see that. And will, at the time, the end of the sentence, announce time, we ask that you please come to the end of your sentence as quickly as possible. The first question will be asked by Mr. Carr, and the question will be answered first by Mr. Shad, and then we'll continue in the rotation throughout.
What will you do to help improve the quality of education within Senate District 32?
Well, one thing is to continue that which we've already begun. We simply have to make certain that there is appropriate funding, not limited to District 32, but for all students in the state of South Carolina. One of the things that's happened over the years has been what we call a tweaking of the formula. When we look at our district, and quite frankly, there is no appreciable difference between citizens in Georgetown, citizens in Williamsburg, Berkeley, Florence, or in our area of Bucksport. But what we see is that poverty is where it is. What that suggests to us is that for those of us who believe that education is our best weapon against poverty, then the motivation, if you will, to make certain that adequate funding is in place for education has to be first and foremost at the front. Education, in addition to that, bears weight on economic development. In Williamsburg County, we're delighted to be a part of the awarding of the Race to the Top grant. And I think to the extent that districts are aggressive when it comes to funding that's available to put the kind of technology in the classroom that kids so desperately need these days, then all of that becomes an essential part of what we need to be about the business of, not only in the Senate, but as citizens as well.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
When we look at the education system, and I'm very happy to see our folks from the education system here from Columbia, South Carolina, who lobby us, and they lobby us during the session. They can tell you that Carl Anderson is pro-education. Just this past session, we fought very hard for our 4-year-olds for First Step. Even though the governor vetoed our bill, we made sure that we rallied across the House floor so that every child will have the opportunity to go to school for a full day instead of a half day at the age of 4 years old. On top of that, we have rallied in the state of South Carolina that everything is fully funded for education throughout the state of South Carolina. But when I look at Senate District 32, which is primarily a rural district, I look at the things that is needed. We need better classrooms. We need the technologies there. We need the same thing that Charleston, Columbia, Greenville, and the surrounding upper state has. So I fight very dearly for education, very hard and very coarse about education, so that we can make sure that our children in Senate District 32 and in House District 103 are taken care of. Not only the children, we made sure that the classrooms are taken care of, that the teachers are taken care of, that even this year we made sure that across the board, not only our educators, but everybody who are state employees got a 2% raise with no increase in the insurance. So education is on the top of my list.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Mr. McKnight.
Thank you. Mr. Carr, I believe your question was, what would I do to improve education in the district? I believe the first thing that we need to do is change the way that we fund education in South Carolina. It doesn't take anyone can travel across the state and see that when you're in Greenville, it looks like the land of milk and honey. But when you come back to District 32, we're somehow tied into the 1950s. I believe we can do that in a number of ways. Number one, school choice is a great way to do that. Our charter schools and our homeschooling is a way for us to provide for education in multiple ways. The other thing that I believe that we can do to improve education in the district and statewide is to make it so that any student that graduates in the top 10% of their class is guaranteed admissions to a state college and or university. Other states do that, and I think it's beneficial because that helps us keep those students here. The other thing that we also could consider is mirroring what they do in Tennessee, and that is offer free community college for every resident of the state. They do that by funding it from the lottery. I think if we try innovative ways of doing this, and school choice, free college for community college, and also the other thing that's most important is improving our infrastructure by providing broadband access, because that way the rural schools that don't offer a particular class can share that via the internet with another school. So those are some innovative ways we can use.
Thank you. The second question, Ms. Broderick will ask, and Mr. Anderson will have the opportunity to answer this one.
What will you do to bring jobs to Senate District 32?
I would work very hard along with the team that's in Columbia to continue to bring jobs to Senate District 32. At the present time, I'm very happy to announce, and in a few days we're going to do it publicly, that I was a part of the team that brought millions of dollars to Senate District 32 for jobs, but successfully we have in this state budget that started on July the 1st, 2014, $5 million for the Port of Georgetown, which would expand to not only Georgetown, but Williamsburg, Horry, Berkeley, and Florence County, because we have people now working in Georgetown from those counties. So we will continue to do that, and we will continue to look out for all of our counties. I had the opportunity to go to Chicago a few years ago because of serving with the NISA, the Northeastern Strategic Alliance, which covers 9 counties in the Low Country, in the PD. We went to a plastic expo. Unfortunately, the jobs that we had pinpoint to come to Williamsburg County, which was there in the Wellman plant, part of Tupperware, we were very successful to get a tag on those things. So across all of this, even the gypsum plant here in Georgetown, we had the opportunity to dialogue to make sure that that plant came to Georgetown and did not go to the upper state. So we will continue to work hard and also build bridges and continue to work with those bridges that we have built already across this state that we might incorporate and bring local businesses to our area in Senate District 32.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight.
Thank you. I would first start by attempting to bring jobs into the district by working closely with our economic development committees and boards that we have in the various counties. I think needs in Williamsburg are a little more unique than those in Georgetown, than those in Horry, than those in Florence, and than those in Berkeley. But it would take a combination of those efforts to do that. One of the things that I think would be a primary job generator in this area would be the dredging of the Georgetown port. Currently, there's a proposal that there'd be $32 million earmarked from the federal government to dredge the port. And what's unique about that is 260,000 jobs in South Carolina come from our ports. So if we were to dredge the port, have greater commerce coming through the ports for our bulk and our break bulk freight, you'd see an uptick in the jobs. The other driving force for jobs in our district is going to be the improvement of our education system. Employers look at your community, your academic standings, and they make a decision as to whether or not they're going to come there. So it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. Number one, you're going to have to go out and recruit the jobs to come with various economic incentives based upon your capabilities. Then we're going to have to make the port more sustainable. We've got to dredge the port. It's got to happen so that we can import and export goods. And lastly, not lastly, but foremost, we've got to focus on improving education so we can recruit more jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sapp.
Yeah, I would just ditto a number of what has been expressed already. One of the other challenges as it relates to the Georgetown port is not only the idea of dredging it, but the idea of maintaining it. And so what we've got to make certain of is that the commitment that has been made by the port in Charleston and South Carolina's port holds true. Because what we have is a situation where the federal government will take over the maintenance of the port once the port begins to bring through 1 million plus tons. And so not only, as Representative Anderson indicated, is the money there to dredge the port, there is a system in place to maintain it once it's dredged. When we look at education, I think Mr. McKnight is correct. The other element to the job piece is the idea of our technical schools and making sure that we have what we call job-ready technical schools. We're pleased to report that Williamsburg Technical College will become a job-ready school once the addition is placed, which has also, Representative Anderson, as you well know, is a part of the budget that we have passed this year. And so the key elements then would be for us to be at the table, to be about the business of improving education, to build the infrastructure, not only water and sewer, but make certain that there's a broadband element to it also. I think the hospitals also play a critical role on the issue of economic development, because one of the things that those folks look for, and I heard the bell, is whether or not there is access to health care. So that would be another feature. Thank you very much.
May I do a correction? My opponent stated that there's $32 million in the federal budget. That is not correct. We brought Senator Lindsey Graham to Georgetown a few months ago and took him on a tour of the Port of Georgetown. We had a meeting with Congressman Rice, and we also met with Congressman Clyburn. In the federal budget, there is $12 million for the Port of Georgetown. And we have also asked Georgetown County for $5 million, and we have asked the business community also, Georgetown Steel and International Paper Company. So I wanted to correct that, because if there was $32 million in the federal budget, we wouldn't need to raise but $1 million to dredge the Port of Georgetown. So there's only $12 million in the federal budget, and we are hoping and praying that it's passed so that we might go on through, dredge our port, get the spinoff from Bowens and other companies coming to Georgetown.
Mr. McKnight, very quickly, this is a forum, ladies and gentlemen. There is not time for rebuttal. It is questions asked and answered only. That's the only way we're going to get through this in a time frame. Mr. McKnight, since we did allow that very briefly.
Thank you. Very briefly, what I was indicating was that Congressman Rice put forth legislation called the Water Resources Reform and Development Act, in which it earmarked $32 million for the Port of Georgetown, and that was passed by the South Carolina House of Representatives. Now, whether it made it through the Senate or not, I'm not sure, and I'm sorry. I was pressed for time, it wasn't clear. But to make an insinuation that I'm putting something forth that's not factual is not true. Are you telling me now that Representative Rice did not introduce that legislation that was passed, and it wasn't passed?
I will answer that, because I'm on the delegation for Georgetown, Williamsburg, and Horry County. And Congressman Rice served the 7th District, which I live in the 7th District. The bill that he placed in stated that there would be water funds, but it did not only state Georgetown, it stated the ports of South Carolina. So that's the correction, the ports of South Carolina, instead of just Georgetown. So it's $12 million in the budget, in the federal budget now. $12 million for Georgetown.
Okay, please proceed.
We need to move on to the third question. We need to move on to the third question. Ms. Duke will ask the third question, and Mr. McKnight will have the opportunity to answer this first.
Thank you.
Again, this is a forum. We have a large number of questions. For us to be able to get through all these questions for all of the different topics, for your information, we need to stay on the time frame. There are no rebuttals. It is questions asked, question answered.
Yes, sir, candidate respond. Who did not respond?
I'm sorry?
You spoke.
I'm sorry, what are we doing now, Al?
We're on to the third question,
Okay.
which we asked by Ms. Duke, and Mr. McKnight has the first answer.
There are several issues facing communities in this district, especially rural areas such as sewage, community roads, and parks. What are your plans to address these issues?
The first thing I want to do if elected to Senate 32 is address the travesty that's befallen the people of Plantersville, in which they have to pay $250 a year extra in their property taxes because they received sewage. And might I add, this was all done under the watch of Representative Anderson. We've left those people in that area, which is an impoverished area with mostly senior citizens, without the wherewithal to pay their property taxes. And I don't have to tell you what will happen. They will eventually lose their homes because they do not pay their taxes. I believe, and let me just say this, there's a gentleman in Washington, D.C. that's responsible for rural water and rural development. He approves every single package in the United States. I grew up with that gentleman. He's my childhood friend. His name is Lorenville Kent Evans, and I talk to him at least 3 or 4 times a day. And he has assured me that with the local areas, when they put in their packages, he will see it through that they are approved. Now, I believe that we could have tackled the $250 burden that they received in taxes in Plantersville had not our legislators decided to give themselves a $12,000 raise, not once, not twice, but 3 times in this legislative session. It's about priorities, and the priorities under my administration would be the people.
Well, I think when it comes to the issue of sewer, grants are key and very important. What we have in our area are grants that are constantly coming in. This year, we were awarded infrastructure grants in all of the counties that we were a part of, both Williamsburg, Clarendon, and 3 separate areas of Williamsburg County. When it comes to parks and recreation, there's simply not enough money to go around. I think one of the things that we have to make certain of is that we are fair to all of the communities. When you look back at the childhood things like how we grew up, it was almost a taking turns kind of system. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that I'm a part of is that we're fair to every district that we represent, realizing that everybody can't go one time. On this issue of the raise, let's just speak to it real quick. What that was an in-district expense. And what we have in Columbia, if we're not careful, is a situation where all we'll have up there are legislators of means. The in-district expense is really not a raise. It's an in-district expense, which means that those monies can be used for community-oriented purposes. They can also be used for reimbursement of things like travel and those kinds of things. And so for those legislators in Columbia who found themselves in situations where they had to make decisions about whether or not they could go certain places because they're not people of means, it then became an important issue as it relates to them. And so it's important to couch that as it is, as an in-district expense and nothing else. Now let's be clear in terms of what happened with that. That is not law. And so when we look in terms of whether or not there are communities that we can help and we can serve, that issue still remains at the forefront of what we've all got to be about business of. And so all I can tell you, Michelle, is that there has to be a continued commitment to our areas as it relates to sewer. Recreation is a quality of life type issue, and we've got to do everything that we can to enhance that. And when it comes to our roads and bridges, that's really a gigantic issue where the state of South Carolina really has to come to grips with how we're going to address it.
Thank you. I'll allow us to have additional time. The other two candidates had it up earlier. We will stay in 1 minute, 30-second answers. Question number 4 will be asked by Mr. Carr, and Mr. Sass has
Carl had to answer that one.
He gets a chance.
My apologies.
He gets a chance.
Sorry.
Thank you. First of all, let me clear the air with my opponent. I have right here in black and white from Georgetown County Water and Sewer District. Yes, it is. It is in black and white, and I can give you a copy of it and the panel a copy of it. What took place in the Plantersville community? The delegation searched and got $1 million grant for the Plantersville sewer project. The time expanded. The $1 million went back. We then wrote the federal government another letter, and they gave us 6 months. And that time expanded because of some of the things that we were going through with the other side that did not want us to dig and deal with the farming area and deal with the woods. But let me tell my opponent that it was Carl Anderson that stood up in the Plantersville community, and it is in the record of the Georgetown Times that Carl Anderson said that he would fight whoever it took to make sure that the Plantersville community got sewer. And today, Plantersville community has sewer. They are paying a $250 fee, and the reason they are paying that fee, my opponent, is because they agreed. 136 residents right here in black and white. Could you read it, Representative Saab? If you are going to say something, make sure you got your facts together.
Please hold your comments and respect the time. If you're going to applaud, please go outside. Hold until the end.
They applaud before. Why you didn't do that before?
Hold on.
And we are talking about the Plantersville community. I was interrupted, so I think I do have a minute left. Now, let me say this, that because we worked very hard that Plantersville got sewer, and they do have sewer, the residents met 3 times, they voted, and they understood what they were doing. There is nothing that the state legislators can do about this, my opponent. This is all left up to the residents and Georgetown County Water and Sewer.
Ladies and gentlemen and candidates, again, I will stress, I understand that there's a lot of emotion involved in this, as there should be. The turnout tonight shows how important this race is and how much everyone cares, the candidates and the constituents and the voters. But this is a forum. This is time. We have a time frame. I ask again, candidates, please stay within the time frame. There are no rebuttals, and we ask that you please limit your applause to the end so we can get through all the questions, so you will have the answers to all of the issues. Thank you very much again. Question number 4 will be asked by Mr. Carr. Mr. Sapp has first answer.
What qualifies you for the office you seek?
Well, let me zero back just for a quick second. I think what we've witnessed as it relates to some of the exchanges, if you really listen closely, is that it takes a team to get any of those kinds of things done that were just mentioned. We're qualified because of our life living. When we look back over our lives, what we see is that we have worked as a school teacher. We've worked at a hospital. We understand not only the idea of healthcare and its import, but we understand how important it was for citizens of South Carolina to consider Medicaid and its expansion. And so when we look at the issues that we've been confronted with over the years, and we look at what we've been about, and that is the idea of not only being a part of education through the school board, but working with various corporations like the Santee Electric Co-op and understanding how it is an economic engine towards economic development. Representing municipalities like the city of Lake City, representing towns like the town of Greeleyville. I believe that the combination of those experiences prepares us for this kind of moment. Being in the House of Representatives, understanding that on the one hand you have the Republicans, on the other hand you have the Democrats, but first and foremost, most of us understand that we're South Carolinians. And so to the extent that we've been able to gain the respect of our peers and become a member of the Ethics Commission, it only speaks volumes about our ability to work across the aisle, and I think that's one of our qualifications.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, the reason that I feel like I'm qualified and ready to serve in the Senate is because the good citizens of District 103 elected me 10 years ago to serve in the House of Representatives. And I have served dutifully and faithfully and brought a lot of things to House District 103. I sit at the table now. I serve on the Labor and Commerce Committee, which a lot of ammunition comes before my committee, and we deal with them. There are a lot of things that I have already been introduced to because I sat at the table with a former member of our delegation. I was introduced to a lot of the directors of the state of Georgetown, and because of that, that's my biggest reason, and the people is my main reason, because I feel like going over to the Senate, I can really be of service to the Senate District 32 because of the bridges that has already been built by me and others. They would be able to get more and to do more. And I serve on NISA, 9 counties. You ask any of my opponents, what have they really done? I have placed 9 bills into the House of Representatives just this session alone. I know how to work across the aisle. I get along with folks. It was Carl Anderson that got an additional $2 million for Williamsburg County for their education system and the special tax when they were getting less than $800,000. Carl Anderson rallied the House floor and made sure they got no less than $2.5 million that they have been getting for the past 7 years. So elect me to the Senate and we will be able to do greater things.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. I believe what makes us qualified is the fact that we take initiative. When it's not comfortable or convenient, we stepped out. 30 months ago, I ran for the South Carolina State Senate, and most people told me that I didn't stand a chance. But what did I do then? I worked hard, I met with you, I talked to you, I addressed your concerns, and I became a part of your community. I think the fact that where some don't see a particular path and that we do, that gives us the unique skills of being capable of being your senator and providing you the opportunities that you oftentimes wouldn't get. I spent part of my career as a solicitor, and I understand and I saw how our sons and daughters went off to jail, and I spend my career now fighting for them. I also spend my days in my office championing the little person. I'm a little person myself, so I like the company. But I fight all the time, and I'm willing to fight for you, and we have demonstrated that time and time again. Yes, some people sit at the table, but they are comfortable there. Yes, some people have been a part of committees, but they don't have anything to show for it, because look where we are now.
Question number 5 will be asked from Ms. Brother, and Mr. Anderson will have first answer.
How do you feel about prayer in schools?
Thank you for that great question. I feel that we do need prayer back in school. Being a minister and also serving in the community and serving in the House of Representatives. Well, most people think that we don't pray, but we open up the House every session with a scripture, a prayer, and the pledge. So I think if we go back to prayer in school, which we came up doing, it would be a better thing for our children and it would help the situation that our children are facing in their daily lives. And I think so also that it would help the instructors and the teachers to be able to do it. Remember, the Bible says, train a child in the way that he or she should go. Yes, they may stray away, but they will come back to that training. The school is a training ground also. And I think if we put prayer back in school, it would help our young people. It would stop some of the things they're doing. It would also help them to be better citizens when they get out of school.
Thank you. Mr. McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Having grown up in a God-fearing family, I know the power of prayer. And I know, having been in school sometimes myself and having not studied the way that I should have, it was only prayer that got me through some classes. I think prayer in school is a wonderful thing. I believe that it helps our children come to know who God is, and if they know who God is, they'll do what they're supposed to do because God will be a guiding force in their life. Now, I don't like the ruling that the Supreme Court put down several years ago, taking organized prayer out of school, but the reality is that likely will not change. However, if it were to change and we were able to put prayer back in school, I definitely would champion that because I believe it would be good for our communities and most importantly, good for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Question number 6.
Mr. Sayre.
I keep doing that. My apologies.
We know that's not intended. To err is human, to forgive divine.
I certainly know so.
Absolutely. There's no question that there are benefits of prayer everywhere we go. And I think Mr. McKnight is correct when he talked in terms of Supreme Court and where we are legally. But when we think in terms of our mindset and where we are, clearly prayer is the key that unlocks the door of most things that are good and beneficial to us all. We did lose much, I think, when we took prayer out of schools. I grew up in the day when we could pray in schools. I think, though, that it passes a responsibility on to us as parents and guardians of our young, where knowing that they are not able to gather and pray at school, it places a greater responsibility on us at home to make sure that they're prayed up before they get there. And so I think one of the things that we have to operate under as citizens is the rule of law. And to the extent that we have to curtail our behavior to make certain that those things that are needed are in place. And clearly the notion of training up a child in the way that you should go is something that most of us practice, not only at home, but as a part of our lives wherever we go. And so that's really kind of all I've got to say about that.
Thank you. Excuse me. Question number 6 will be asked by Ms. Duke, and Mr. McKnight has first answer.
Mr. McKnight, there are Small Business Administration and USDA rural economic development loans earmarked for rural development. But it seems that there is a disconnect between local commercial banks and many local businesses in securing these loans. What would your plan be to encourage local banks to promote these federal business loans, thus helping local businesses in their funding needs?
Thank you, Ms. Duke. I think that banks are primarily in the business of loaning money. So to the extent that those loans aren't going out, it may be that our smaller local banks don't know about these particular loans. So one of the things that we can do as state senator is go in and talk to our banking community and advise them of the availabilities of these funds. The other thing that we have to do is also talk to our small businesses and talk to them about the availability of the monies necessary for them to get started. Being a small business owner myself, I know that capital is the lifeblood, and you're going to need some credit at some point, regardless of what your business is, to continue for it to operate. So where it is available, we need to take advantage of that. But I think the key would be in publicizing the availability of these particular funds. When it comes to the USDA, as I've indicated before, I talk daily to someone from the USDA, particularly about things with regard to rural development, rural water, and rural sewer. So I'm aware of the grants and the programs that are available, but the key is getting the word out. And one of the ways that we can definitely get that out is regularly coming to our communities and talking to our citizens and being available to them to advise them of what's going on. That's how you stand.
Thank you. Mr. Sapp.
Yes, sir. And in addition to that, I think that community action groups that are active in their community have a role to play in being a part of a team such that information like that is in fact passed to the community. I think one of the other problems that we have in the area of banking is an archaic system that relates to credit scores. Some of our banks, like First Federal over in King Street, have developed a different formula to determine whether or not persons are credit worthy. A lot of our problem is not so much people in knowing about it and applying, it's people in qualifying. And so if we were to adjust the way that our credit scores are created, now I think that it would create greater opportunities for persons to become entrepreneurs. When we think in terms of the free market in the United States of America, that's clearly the key. There was some important legislation passed this past year dealing with micro enterprises. And it's a part of the hope that the Department of Commerce, as it develops the guidelines associated with micro enterprises, that funding resources will become more readily available for small businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. What a very good question, and I thank you for it because I told you earlier about my family business of 20 years with Anderson Furniture and Appliance. Well, we were the one that received an SBA loan to build a new facility and to help us along the way. So annually, I have a town hall meeting, and I bring folks in from all over the state of South Carolina where they can tell the people of District 103 some of the things and answer some of the questions. And that was one of the questions that have been asked at my town hall meeting, and it has been answered. And plenty of people have been helped throughout the process of the SBA. And normally when I get a call, I know who to go to in Columbia. I know who to call in Washington, that the person may get a packet. They may get all of the help they need, fill out all the information, get help with filling out the information, and get a loan. I also serve on the Waccamaw Regional Council of Government here in Georgetown. The office is in Georgetown, but it serves Georgetown, Williamsburg, and Horry counties, the 3 counties. And that organization has been a great help to the 3 counties that I just named for getting SBA loan and helping folks to get what they need and the help that they need. The main question is that when you are in dire need of something, you need to ask and go to the right source. And when a person has been there and they know the right source to go to, they can guide you there and help you along the way.
Thank you. Question number 7 will be answered first by Mr. Sapp, and Mr. Carl will ask the question.
Please explain your position on women's right to choose.
My position on a woman's right to choose really is bordered on the idea of Roe versus Wade, which is simply the law of the land. What we have, and there's an interesting article in the Georgetown Times recently about teen pregnancy and its decline. And I think a lot of that has to do with education of our teens and the teen prevention measures that we've got in place. One of the conversations that we occasionally have in Columbia is on the question of individual rights and individual freedoms. And so then the question as it relates to a woman's right to choose is that in fact an individual freedom that she ought to enjoy as long as it is exercised within the confines of the law. I don't believe that the idea of shutting down the qualified clinics as is happening around the United States is actually the answer. I think we create more of a dangerous condition for those persons that exercise their right as opposed to being about the business of promoting our own views. And so for 2 reasons. One, I believe that it's an individual right and a liberty of a woman's right to choose. The other is, I think that it's constitutionally protected.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Well, there was a great article in the Georgetown Times this past week about teen pregnancy, in which on the west end of Georgetown, a feasible study was done over the summer, and education was first, and there were some other avenues. But when it comes down to the teens, we really need to do our teaching, go back to what we talked about the prayer in schools. We need to have a handle on our young teens. We need to teach them. We need to be role models. Georgetown County Boys Mentor Group is a great role model for the boys of Georgetown County. There are also some girls outfit that is there. So to deal with the choose, I believe that a woman should have the right to choose. But there are things that we can do to avoid them from getting to that point. And that's doing our teaching, help them, mentor those young ladies and those young men, and let them know what we did and what we might have to go through. They do not have to go through it with all the things that are out there today for protection.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Personally, I'm opposed to the idea of abortion. However, I do not believe that the United States government, or any government for that matter, should be able to tell a woman what she can and cannot do with her body. I support the decision that and I echo the sentiments that Mr. Saab has just given us with regard to Roe versus Wade. That decision came down in 1973. It's 41 years old, and it's the law of the land. I do believe that if a person and if a woman decides that she does not want to have a child, she should have that right. I think people forget what the world was like before Roe versus Wade. And that was a lot of young ladies seeking abortions in facilities that were not safe. And they engaged in practices that damaged them for the rest of their life. I believe if a woman decides that's what she wants to do, then she should have that right. And I don't see the government being allowed to be intrusive into her personal health decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 8. We direct first to Mr. Anderson, asked on Ms. Crawford.
What are the immediate areas of concern that you would address during your first year as senator?
In Senate District 32, the immediate concern would be, number 1, education, number 2, health care, number 3, our elderly and disabled persons, and number 4, our roads and bridges. And I placed it in that order because education is very much needed throughout not only the state of South Carolina, but throughout the world. Secondly, our people have the right to have the education that is needed, that they might face anybody across this country. On top of that, we serve in South Carolina. There are things in South Carolina that we need to step up to the plate and get done. Funding is available, so we need to go ahead and do some things. When it comes to the last part of that, health care. The Affordable Care Act, a lot of people call it the Obamacare. It has been great. I witnessed, because of my town hall meeting, and not only my town hall meeting, I had a special meeting in Andrews and in Georgetown that incorporated the people to come down and to explain the Affordable Care Act and to help people write that application. We saw where one husband and wife went from paying $266 a month to paying less than $50 a month for the Affordable Care insurance. So that's one thing. Healthcare is very important, and I'd like to see everybody taken care of health-wise. And our elderly and disabled, I get calls all the time, and I refer them to the necessary office that they might get the help that they need and also be provided with the source of help that they need. There are numerous amount of people that go to the doctor but do not have the money to even buy their medicine. And not only do I go to the help, but I help them. Our road and bridges, and I'm going to hit on this, our road and bridges are in terrible shape.
Thank you. Mr. McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. My area of immediate concern in the district is to stop the drain of young people from our communities. We need our young people here, number one, to work so that they can pay the taxes and be the brain trust that we need for the future. One of the ways that I plan on dealing with that within the first 100 days of you sending me to the Senate is to introduce legislation that will make our state certified, trained, and licensed professionals exempt from state income tax for the first 5 years if they agree to live and work in District 32 and areas like it throughout the state, particularly somewhere along the corridor of Shane. The other thing that I'm focused on is getting our citizens the necessary water and sewer that they need. The community of Alvin, I've already met with them and brought engineers as recently as last week for them to talk so that they can gather up, create their not-for-profit organization, and therefore get the necessary funding from the United States Department of Agriculture. The other great area of need is we have a permanent class of people in our district that are unemployable. I'm talking about those young men and women that have a felony conviction. I believe that our state, we need laws that will give our nonviolent first-time felony offenders an expungement. That way, they can get to work and they can become productive members of our community.
Thank you. Mr. Sack.
And that is legislation that actually passed this year.
Right.
Senator Carl Allen introduced legislation in the Senate that I championed on the House floor that does exactly that. And so I think Ms. McKnight is correct, and there are efforts underway to get that done. With regard to my priorities, I think that health care is first and foremost. I think that Representative Anderson is correct when he talks in terms of the Affordable Health Care Act and what it's done. But the missing piece of that puzzle is the Medicaid expansion piece. What happened was there were folks at the table, and nobody anticipated that a portion of the Affordable Health Care Act would be found to be constitutional and another portion would not. And so what we had was all of these hospitals who were anticipating that what they would lose on the one hand, they would gain on the other hand because you would have more people that are insured. And so what has happened is our hospitals have been simply left holding the bag by our failure to expand Medicaid. And so I think that that is a battle that we simply have to continue to fight in the South Carolina Senate. That battle is not over until it's over, and I think every single year we have to do everything we can along those lines. We've all touched on the idea of education, so let me shift gears to our roads and bridges. I think the thing that people ought to know, and I'm not suggesting that I've necessarily got the answer to the problem, but the problem with our roads and bridges is a multi-billion-dollar problem. And while we've done things in the House, like all of the additional revenue that comes when the budget leaves the House and goes to the Senate, throwing that money on the area of roads and bridges. All right.
Question number 9 will be asked to Mr. McKnight as first answer.
Ms. McKnight, what are your views on public schools, public charter schools, private schools, and homeschooling?
Thank you, Ms. Duke. I'm a product of public schools. I come from a family of educators. My grandmother was a teacher. My great-uncle was a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher. My aunt, who's in the back of the room, is a retired educator. I believe in public education. That is one of the foundations of this country, and it's what makes our nation great. However, the way that we do things in South Carolina must change. We cannot have children going to a 21st century school in Richland County, but yet come home to Williamsburg County, like one of the schools I attended, C.E. Murray High School, and they have a library that has books in it that are 60 years old. That's not right. I believe that we need to be innovative in our approach to education. Charter schools are one of them. My old elementary school is D.P. Cooper's elementary school, and their principal, Kerry Singleton, has been a godsend to that community because he's turned that school into a charter school, and they're doing wonderful things. So, I believe that our public schools are going to be the salvation of our communities because they're going to give us our future leaders. They have to improve because once they improve, employers look to our communities as a place for a viable place for their businesses, and those are the things that we need to focus on. I'm a true champion of public education. I would not be where I am without it, and I thank every day for all the teachers that I've ever had because they've been a godsend to me.
Thank you. Mr. Sapp.
Thank you. I believe that that public education is, of course, of critical import. the innovative schools, innovative schools like charter schools, and a lot of what's happening in education, the homeschooling, all of those mechanisms are good. I think what's key, as we look at it from the state perspective, is that there are standards in place whereby all of our children are measured. And one of the things that we cannot allow, I don't think, is to have disparities in the criteria of what qualifies, for instance, for a diploma. And so as we become innovative and as we create schools that are tailored towards the needs of our children, I still believe that there must be consistent standards whereby the education of those children are measured. And so to the extent that we continue to develop, and I've supported legislation in the House for the charter schools like the one we have at Williamsburg-Blakely, but what we have to make certain about is that those things are in place. The other aspect, when we look at charter schools and those other schools, is the question as to how do they integrate to the extent that they don't have extracurricular activities because of the absence of the numbers and those kinds of things. And what we've done in the House is we've created a vehicle by which those children that have the talent, that might be at a charter school that doesn't have football, or that doesn't have band, or those kinds of things, we've created a mechanism by which those children can continue to grow. And so I think that the educational system that we have in place continues to be a work in progress. But if we stay focused and understand that it's all about the education of the children and not about us, then we can continue to make progress in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. I positively support public education because that's how I came up, and I know that it is good. It is good for everybody. I also support the charter school, and I also support the homeschool because of the bills that we have passed in the House. But we make sure, first and foremost, that our public education system is taken care of. And then again, I refer to Ms. Elizabeth, who is here from the South Carolina Education Association, who could stand and say that Anderson fully supports public education, and before I vote on anything, I make sure I go to my South Carolina Public Education Association persons and ask them first, is this bill a good bill for us to support, or should we let it ride? And normally they will give me the correct answer, and I follow their lead because of the support. Now, we have made sure that, as I said earlier, Williamsburg County has that charter school. We made sure, and I think I see across the audience somewhere, the Reverend Alfred Darby, who's a school board member there, that really championed that charter school, and I also see the principal, Dr. Singleton, but we made sure that that school would be funded. And they will start this year, 2014, 2015, the first time as a charter school. So I'm in support. I made sure that things happen. My bill that went through the House this year that would guide them to help them in the athletic department, also as homeschool and charter school, is a bill that was passed.
Thank you. Question number 10 will be asked by Mr. Carr. Mr. Savage, first answer.
How will you advocate for a fair tax exemption for corporations that relocate to Senate District 32?
Thank you, Mr. Carr. You know, one of the things that I've talked with members of our federal delegation about is when we look at an area like, for instance, Williamsburg County, when NAFTA occurred, we had a number of our businesses and industries to locate overseas. What we're discovering now is that those businesses are now finding that it's more advantageous for them to relocate in South Carolina and places like South Carolina than to stay overseas, both because of the quality of the product that we produce here in the United States of America, and in addition to that, the increase in wages in those foreign areas. And so one of the things that I want to see is one of the reasons why those corporations are not relocating back here is because they have billions of dollars in offshore accounts, and it'll be taxed if they come back to the United States of America. But I think that we need to use that as an avenue to reemploy folks in these places that they left. So for instance, if Baxter Travenor were to decide that they would come back to where they left, i.e. Williamsburg County, I think that we should incentivize that as an opportunity. But I think that we ought to direct those companies to come back to these impoverished areas where they left from. And so I think that we've got to continue to be innovative as it relates to those things. What we know is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and so we've got to have some flexibility in the process to make those kinds of things occur.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, you've got to be at the table. And being at the table makes a difference. When we took the trip to Chicago, because of being a member of NISA, my colleague also represents a part of one of the 9 counties NISA represents for the PD area. But, I've never, got involved with that part with him. But I'd like to say this. The trip that we went to Chicago, because I was there at the table, there was a gentleman that I was talking to, and I told him that Georgetown Steel had closed. And he says, well, if you're interested, I will get you to the corporate office. I went and met with the corporate office for Georgetown Steel. And behold, they made a promise that they would reopen our steel mill. And our steel mill is now reopened and has hired approximately 300 persons that is making $17 plus an hour. So when you're at the table, there's a lot you can do. And there is a lot at State and Senate District 32 that needs to be taken care of. There's a lot of things that we can take care of. There's a lot of business efforts that would come to Senate District 32. All we've got to do is reach out to them.
Thank you. Mr. McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. I believe your question was about tax incentives for corporations. I think they're necessary, particularly in areas like this, for us to give corporations an opportunity, a tax incentive to say that they'll be exempt from state income taxes or state taxes for a while if they agree to locate in an impoverished area. But what we have seen in the past is we've given those economic incentives. The business will come for 4 or 5 years, make their money, and leave. I think that we need to give those incentives, but they also needs to be a punishment for leaving our communities after 5, 10 years of making your money and going away. So one of the things I think we should do is have the incentives, but also have a caveat with the law that says if you leave in 5 years, if you take your business and locate offshore or move to another community, you're going to face a stiff tax penalty for abandoning the community, because it comes in, it absorbs our resources, and then it leaves. And that's not fair. That's not fair to the taxpayers for them to just come in for 5 to 10 years and just abandon us. So tax incentives are important. They very much so are, but we don't just need to give away everything and end up ultimately with nothing.
Thank you. Question number 11. Ms. Bravo will ask question number 11. Mr. Anderson has first answer.
Please give us some of your ideas of promoting wellness in Senate District 32.
Well, what a good question, especially when I got on the scale this morning. But the wellness part, we have had bills introduced that would help with the wellness and the fitness of all of South Carolina. There are some programs that's already there. We made sure that we were a part of the team that brought the YMCA, a local YMCA, to Georgetown County, which would help in the area of people going there, doing their exercise, and there are a lot of seniors that go and do the water exercise now. So the wellness part is very dutiful. We have a very serious diabetes core group here that surrounds the area of South Carolina, and it helps our citizens to know what is needed of them so that they may not get in the danger zone. But when it comes to the bills that we're passing, we have passed several bills. We have put some money in the budget that would help various areas. So the Commerce Department for the state of South Carolina is one of the departments that any citizen that desires to open up a wellness center need to talk with Commerce and get all of the ins and outs and know the help that is there and the money that is there for them, that they might open that business and be successful in helping our citizens.
Thank you. Mr. McKnight.
One of the ways that we can promote wellness within the district is to tackle what we call food deserts. What do I mean by that? There are communities that do not have grocery stores or access to grocery stores, but they have convenience stores. But what they end up doing is eating what's available in that particular store. Processed meats, high saturated fats, food, and the like. Don't get me wrong, I was raised on Perlo and barbecue, and I love it. However, you have to eat it in moderation. So one of the things we can do is provide economic incentives for local grocers to stay open. I know one of the communities that I live in, that's in Williamsburg County, Greeleyville, for years they had a grocery store. Now it's gone. So if you don't have a ride to Manning, Kingstree, Monk's Corner, or the rest, you're left at eating at the local store. So one of the ways we do that is the incentives for the businesses to stay open. And the other thing is we have to educate our people on eating right. We all have someone in our family that suffers from diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, and all of the things along with it. We have to get off of our sedimentary lifestyle. We have to get away from that. And that means educating our people to walk an hour a day, to engage in physical activity that'll make them more healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sal.
And I often get them in PTI. But a young man or a young woman that ends up charged and goes to the public defender's office, they're going to end up going to jail or going to end up under the custody of the Department of Probation and Parole. So we're going to have to discipline better in school more fairly, and we're also going to have to fairly implement and punish people more equally.
Thank you. Question number 14 will be asked by Mrs. Farley, and Mr. Anderson has the first answer.
What plan do you have to revitalize the areas in Senate District 32 that are in the throes of an economic downturn?
Could you please repeat the question? I cannot hear you.
What plan do you have to revitalize the areas in Senate District 32 that are in the throes of an economic downturn?
Senate District 32 is basically a rural area, and there's a lot of revitalization to do across the 5 counties. When you look at the district, when most of it is rural, that means that a lot of the areas have not been touched in a perfective manner. So the first thing that I would do is I would sit down with all of the county officials of the 5 counties, and we would have a dialogue of what they need done. The second thing that would be taken care of, not only with the county officials, I would sit down with all the mayors and see what is on their agenda. And the third thing is I would sit down with the community, call the communities together and sit down with them, hear their viewpoints, and we would prioritize things to see what needs to be taking place first, second, and third. And we will work toward those things, and we will give them an update. Just like I have an annual meeting now, I will have a meeting in all of those areas that the people would be able to talk to me, and I would be able to listen to them. I will bring in the right help, the right persons to challenge and help the situation that is needed, and then we will be able to be successful in revitalizing all of the areas of Senate District 32.
Thank you. Mr. McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. We start revitalizing our communities again by improving education. If we have better schools, we have more people that are inclined to stay and live. And as they stay and live, they improve the communities by building homes, buying homes, and doing the like. The other way that we revitalize is by fixing our infrastructure, our roads and our bridges. I've ridden all across this district, and it's dodging potholes from one end to the next, especially when I ride down somewhere like Pennyroyal Road here, or I travel over to the Bucksport community in Horry, or I travel over to Alvin and over into Eddytown and Pineville. Our communities are not going to grow if we have crumbling roads where people have to spend their money getting a new front end if they happen to hit a pothole. But the other thing, the other component of infrastructure is bringing broadband internet access to our communities. It allows businesses to come there and work, and it also allows people to work from home. Because there's several people, and that's an economic incentive because they don't have to spend so much money on transportation costs. So that's my plan.
Thank you. Mr. Sapp.
I think when we look at most of the areas, they actually have some plans along the lines of economic development that lends itself to infrastructure improvements and adds to what is going on in some of our towns. Unfortunately, what we're finding in our small towns is that businesses are not locating there. They're tending to locate on the outskirts, in the malls, and all of those kinds of things. I think that there's still tax incentive opportunities there for us to encourage those persons to locate in our towns in order that we might not allow what is happening in towns like Greeleyville, where I live, where there are only 2 stores downtown. But fortunately, there are members of the private sector that are simply stepping up to the plate and saying, no, we're not going to allow the buildings to be torn down. And so then the question is, what role does policymakers have in allowing those persons to have an opportunity to build what is so much needed? I believe that there's got to be a public-private partnership in place to make those kind of revitalization efforts come to life. We don't talk about what we can do individually, because I believe when we start this I, me kind of stuff, I don't think it goes anywhere. I think when we start building the kind of coalitions that we need, that is the way we're going to get things done. And you know, I listen to folks sometimes when they talk in terms of all of the things that I've done. And I say to myself, well, gee, was I in the legislature right along with you? And that is not to say that we are all not about the business of getting things done. But I think it's, quite frankly, just a wee bit misleading to suggest that one person is making all of these kinds of things happen. And so here we are. Okay.
Mr. Carolina, ask you to come up on stage for a moment. We'll continue. Just need you over here just a moment. Next question will be asked on his due, and Mr. McKnight has the first answer.
Mr. McKnight, the governor has vehemently opposed extending Medicaid coverage to thousands of your constituents. If she wins re-election, what would be your plan of action to change her mind? If her opponent, Senator Shaheen, wins, what would be your approach to counter her previous stance?
Well, I'm praying and working daily for Vincent Shaheen to be our next governor, because Nikki Haley has to go. What should have been done, and what we could do, is a grassroots effort from our community and our constituents to put pressure on Governor Haley. We didn't see any leadership from our legislators when she originally turned down the Medicare expansion. Well, what do I mean by that? We could have flooded the governor's office with telephone calls. We could have flooded it with emails. We could have done what they do in North Carolina with their Moral Mondays, and that is every Monday be on the grounds of the State House with our constituents, letting her know that we desperately need Medicare. You have to take the initiative. Yes, I understand she's a Republican. So, yes, I understand that the legislature is dominated by Republicans. So, we still have to make the effort to bring the attention to those in power that we don't accept the status quo that they're trying to establish. Now, one of the things that I would do, and if Vincent Shaheen wins, when he wins, we don't have to worry about the Medicare expansion, because I know that'll probably be one of the first pieces of legislation that he engages in.
Thank you. Mr. Sapp.
You know, if you come to Columbia, you know what's going on up there. I mean, come on. We did have Moral Monday in Columbia. I mean, it was all in the newspaper and on the news. Folks blocked the access to the State House. We had to go around because there were people in South Carolina engaged in the stuff. This was not something that the state of South Carolina, not the legislatures, took lightly. We had several events on the Capitol grounds drawing attention to the issue, and so it's disingenuous to make those kinds of allegations when there we were on the forefront trying to make sure that these kinds of things happen. And not only was it us, when they had the subcommittee meeting on the issue, every CEO from every major hospital in the state of South Carolina was right there, making it absolutely clear about how devastating the absence of Medicaid expansion would be to our state and how it would impact the rural community. And so let's be real. What we simply have to do if Nikki Haley becomes governor, we got to continue to put the kind of pressure on her that we put when it came to public education. When we looked at the first time she gave her State of the State address, if you'll read it, not a single mention of public education in it. The second time, the only mention of public education related to public charter schools. But now where's the conversation? The conversation is that we're expanding 4K, we're adding more money to the system, and so what we've got to do in Columbia is what we've been doing. We've got to continue to add the kind of pressure that we've been doing all of these years, and I believe together we can make a difference on those kinds of issues.
But you never once contacted your constituents and asked them to write the governor, call her, and complain about the Medicare expansion. I'll come to Columbia if you invite me, but you never did. You've never invited any of us.
There is no rebuttal. This is question and answer. Thank you, Mr. Saab. Mr. Anderson. Please, Mr. Anderson, your response.
Ms. Michelle, would you repeat the question, please?
The governor has vehemently opposed extending Medicaid coverage to thousands of your constituents. If she wins re-election, what will be your plan of action to change her mind? If her opponent, Senator Shaheen, wins, what will be your approach to counter her previous stance?
Well, I agree with Representative Saab that there have been many efforts that we have done to help with this system, and I want to thank him for bringing that out. First of all, if the governor gets reelected, we will go down to her office and request to have a conversation with her like we did before, and it's on the record, and we will tell her what is needed in our area and what we expect of her to do. The second thing is, if Senator Vincent Shaheen is elected as the governor, we will do the same thing. We will go down to his office, request a meeting with him, have a dialogue with him, and ask him to please help us in the nation state of South Carolina to prevent some of the things that our people have been going through. They have been locked down with their health care, and we will ask him to release some of that. Now, just to share with you, the money that we could have gotten is gone. Another state got what South Carolina was supposed to get because it was refused by our governor. But there are some things that are still in the making. Just like we worked very hard for the Affordable Care Act, we will work very hard that the citizens of this state and the citizens of Senate District 32 gets their fair share of what they need to make it in life.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Mr. Carr, and Mr. Saab has first answer.
Mr. Saab, please state your platform in 3 words.
Let me try two. Progressive improvements. I think that what we've got to do is we've got to analyze where we are. And we got to do it community by community. We got to do it in a measured sort of a way so that we simply see ourselves progressing. When we look specifically at Williamsburg County, just for a second, if we might please. What we see with regard to education is a number of the things that I shared with you before. As it relates to our hospital, we examined where we were, and there's nothing but progress that's taking place ever since. I use those two only as an example, but I believe that that's the approach that we simply have to adopt. We've got to come together on the one hand and get an understanding of where we are. On the other hand, we simply have to measure where we are and then travel in a forward direction in order that we can see the quality of life around our district improve. One of the things that I've done in my life is every December, I take an inventory of my life in terms of how have I improved in the various aspects of my life the year before. I think that's simply a life lesson that was learned by me, but I believe it works as it relates to leadership. And so my platform simply is to be about the business of measuring where we are and adopting the notion of progressively improving that condition in order that we might be able to enhance the quality of life for our citizens in this district.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
The 3 words, get it done. Fully funding education, get it done. Millions of dollars appropriated for the technical colleges, get it done. Make sure that our state employees continue to get a raise, get it done. State health insurance plans, get it done. Appropriate millions of dollars for community-based programs, get it done. Appropriate millions of dollars for the Department of Health and Human Services for Medicaid, get it done. Deal with what we need to do for our roads and bridges, get it done. My 3 words are, get it done.
Thank you. Mr. McKnight.
The 3 words that sum up my campaign would be jobs, education, and opportunity. Our district is going to rise or fail based upon the work that our citizens are able to do. We must, in a leadership position, provide an atmosphere where jobs and industry will feel welcome in District 32. Education is going to be the lifeblood of our communities. Our schools are where we train our future. Our schools is where we get our future leaders, and we must do more to improve them. And beyond that, opportunity, not just for myself, but for everyone in District 32. An opportunity for them to provide an opportunity for them to have a life better than they had before. An opportunity for them to live the life that they want to live and make it better for their children. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Mrs. Farwood, and Mr. Anderson will have first response.
What is your plan to ensure that the best and brightest students in South Carolina receive a quality education? And what steps should be taken to improve the chances of motivating these students to remain in South Carolina after graduation?
One of the things that we have done over the years is in Williamsburg County, we sat at the table with the school board members along with Williamsburg Technical College Board, and we introduced and agreed that high school students would go to Williamsburg Technical College. They could work on a trade or work on a business degree. During the school time, they would get credit hours towards a degree, so that when they finish high school, if they decide not to go to a 4-year college, they can go right to Williamsburg Technical College and they have hours already. If they decide to go to a 4-year college, they still got those hours that they can carry over with them. The same thing goes for Horry Georgetown Technical College, the same thing for Trident Technical College, all of in the area, and Florence Darlington Technical College. The other thing that we would see is that we promote scholarships for children. Across District 103, Carl Anderson, and I'm not speaking I'm speaking personally because this came from me personally out of my personal funds, because I care about young people and I know how others sacrifice to help me to get an education. So Carl Anderson promotes a scholarship every year so that 2 or 3 children across my district would be able to get a book scholarship that would help them along the way. Also, if there is a student that goes to any college in the Columbia area, I invite them to call me, and I just gave a young lady my card last night who is graduated and she's going to USC. I gave her my card because there are things in the State House that we can get them to do. My first legislative aid was from the Annie Village community of Georgetown. He just had an update that he's in California right now as a writer. My first page was from Hemingway, South Carolina.
Thank you.
sorry.
It's okay.
Go right ahead. Go ahead. Could you repeat your question, because I thought it was two-part. Please.
What is your plan to ensure that the best and brightest students in South Carolina receive quality education? And what steps should be taken to improve the chances in motivating these students to remain in South Carolina after graduation?
Well, the steps to improve that they have access to a better education is naturally implementing more funding for our public schools and enabling our communities to have charter schools and to have homeschooling. Now, the way that we get our best and brightest to stay in our communities is on the way that I outlined earlier. We need to, if a young person, and I don't care if they're a CNA, LPN, RN, doctor, lawyer, whomever, if they live and work in an impoverished area like District 32 or anywhere along the corridor of Shane, Clarendon County, Dillon County, any of those places, if they agree to live in that community and work there for 5 years after starting their career, I believe they should be exempt from state income taxes. Well, what does that do? Number one, it gives the poor school districts more access to younger teachers, because the younger teachers, when they come out of school, are looking to do what? Move and get the highest salary they can. But where our local school districts cannot do that, they're more inclined to stay because they're not having to be faced with our state income tax. The other thing that we can do is we can initiate programs to keep our best and brightest students here. In Texas, if you graduate in the top 10% of your class, you're guaranteed admission to a state college or university in that state. We need a program like that here in South Carolina to keep our young people here. If they go to school here, they'll tend to stay.
Thank you. Mr. Sapp.
You know, that's really feel-good legislation, y'all. When you think about the idea of just exempting all kids from taxes, that's really feel-good legislation. When you talk to folks in Columbia who do the economic impacts that has to attach to those kinds of bills, what they'll tell you is that it's almost immeasurable. In addition to that, they'll tell you that the problem is, how do you prevent fraud? For instance, if you've got a law firm and the law firm decides to hire, like I have, somebody who's working here, and I just allow him to man the office, and I get a $2 million case in Richland County, guess what I'm going to do? I send it to him in Williamsburg. All of a sudden, the $2 million fee is not taxed. And so when you look at that kind of legislation, it's simply feel-good legislation that's being offered at the convenience of the moment, has absolutely no chance of passing, in my humble opinion. And so what we've got to do when we look at those kinds of things is, I think we've got to be real. Now, the Texas model that was mentioned, I think, is a decent model. And the question is whether or not we can figure out a way to do that kind of thing in our state. The idea of the way that we create the criteria for our scholarships, I think, is flawed. Because a number of our children get scholarships, and just because they don't keep an A-B average, then they lose their scholarships. I don't believe that's the way it ought to be. Because when we look in terms of Americans in general, most of us who are doing decent things and living decent lives are not A-B students. A number of us are C students, and every once in a while perhaps an occasional D. And we've got to maintain an average, but this idea of only allowing those persons who maintain A-B is not how it ought to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the last question of the question and answer series before the closing remarks on our candidates. The last question will be asked by this student, and Mr. McKnight has first response.
Mr. McKnight, with the dredging project planned for Georgetown, do you see any spin-off jobs created in the area, and will there be any minority set-aside contracts provided? If so, how will you help inform contractors of these contracts and help implement them?
Well, if the port is dredged, obviously there's going to be an increase in the persons that are working, because there'll be more shipments coming in, there'll be more loads to unload, there'll be more things of that nature for people, for jobs for them to engage in. Now, the way that you get the words about minority set-aside contracts, that's something that's often set aside by the federal government, and that's an issue that maybe our federal delegation would address. But I would get the word out to our potential contractors that they need to apply for those jobs. But let me address this. Instead of attacking my plan, Why not come up with a plan of your own, Mr. Sabb, to get our people to stay here? You've introduced no legislation at all in the two terms that you've been in the South Carolina legislature. Not one bill. So what do you go to Columbia to do? Get along, go along to get along? We need somebody in Columbia that just won't be someone in a seat. We need somebody there that will fight for us and not attack any idea that comes up to make life better for our children.
Mr. Sapp.
Well, let me be clear. The life I've lived has not been one of sitting on the sidelines. The life I've lived has not been one of, rather than working in my office, going to Columbia for the convenience of being in the State House. And so anybody who knows me knows that I've never been about that business. Now, see, if you're really interested, and I know you're not because it's on my website, you can look at the bills that I've been a part of introducing. And in fact, Kevin Lewis is here somewhere, just in the event you would bring up something like that that has no basis and no merit to it. But let's talk in terms of...
Name one bill that you've written and sponsored. Name one.
Mr. Sapp, please, audience, please. Mr. Sapp, continue.
Well, here's what I know, y'all. Here's what I know. What you see is what you get. And so if that's what you want in leadership, that's what you get. What I would encourage you all to do is simply measure your candidates. You measure them in terms of their intellect. You measure them in terms of their history. You measure not what they say they'll do, but what they've in fact done. See, we've lived a life of service, so we don't have to create anything. We know what it's like to coach a basketball team and to give up all of your Saturdays with your family for 4 straight months and be with those kids, and when the moms don't come to get them, take them home. That's what we call service. That's spending time with kids and trying to be about the business of helping and direct them. And so when you talk about me, let's be absolutely clear that you're looking in the mirror and asking yourself the question, what have you done? What have you done?
Would you please repeat the question?
Project, correct? I lost track. With the dredging project planned for Georgetown, do you see any spin-off jobs created in the area? And will there be any minority set-aside contracts provided? If so, how will you help inform contractors of these contracts and help implement?
I'm going to ask you one more time to please repeat that question and speak in the mic where I can hear. I didn't get to hear all of
it. With the dredging project planned for Georgetown, do you see any spin-off jobs created for the area? And will there be any minority set-aside contracts provided? If so, how will you help inform contractors of these contracts and help implement them?
Thank you. Number one, we have worked very hard to make sure that it happens. The Port of Georgetown get dredged. Sitting at the table, going to Washington, D.C., asking our congressmen to place money in their budget. We agreed 2 years ago, and Representative Sabb, I have to give him credit, he voted right along with me, that we placed $300 million in the ports of South Carolina. That money is there. We took care of some things at the Charleston port, but to bring you up to par, Serving in the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, which I am the chair-elect, and I will take seat in November after this election. We met with Bowens, and we asked them the question of what can be done for the minority contractors. From that dialogue, they started a class at Trident Technical College and also a class that is spinning off at Horry Georgetown Technical College to inform our minority contractors of things that they can do to prepare themselves for the spin-off jobs that are going to come once the Port of Georgetown is dredged. Those persons have been filling out their papers. Those persons are a part of it. Some of those persons have already started working with parts of Bowen being constructed now in North Charleston.
Thank you. And the second panelists, thank you for the question and answer session. This time we'll have closing statements from our candidates, and again, in order with the draw, it stays the same. Our closing statements are 2 minutes, and as I say that, I'm changing my timer. 2 minutes each. Please again stay within your allotted time. Mr. Shedd will have a closing statement first, and we'll go to Mr. Anderson and Mr. McKnight. Mr. Shedd, your closing statement.
Thank you, Brother Moderator. I actually thought you were going to reverse it. And since I went first time, I would go last the last time. But we simply accept the rules as they are. Let me just quickly say that we're privileged to be here tonight. We think that you've gotten an opportunity to do a couple of things. We think that you've gotten an opportunity to hear us communicate. I think that you've gotten an opportunity to evaluate the kind of leader you believe we are. And when I say we are, I'm saying that because there's a record of the kind of leadership we've been about the business of over these past 25, almost 26 years. And so where you've got a record of service, we think that to be significant. It is easy for us to say that we've got to do something about the business of our children and our young African-American boys and getting in trouble and all of those kinds of things. But it's another thing to make sure that you spend time with them while they're young and try to be a part of directing them in the right path. You see, the idea of what we will do, we submit to you, is simply an idea. But an idea without being put into practice is no good. It's simply a good idea. And so all I want you all to know as you evaluate us on this day, that we have lived the kind of life and we've been a part of the kind of leadership where we believe that in this district we ought to be a bit about the business of one people, one district, one senator, and one mission. And that mission needs to be about the business of progressive improvement in our area. Because as we examine the things that we've been a part of all of these years, we're satisfied that we've got the kinds of abilities that can allow us to be your mouthpiece in Columbia. We've advocated strongly for the positions that we take, and I will never tell you all that it's all about Ronnie Sabb. We believe that a lot of it's all about the process. One of the things that I heard Hugh Leatherman, the president of the Senate, say recently, and Senator Johnson chair, and he can attest to this, he said, we are not Republican senators, nor are we Democratic senators. We are South Carolinians, and that's what I'll be in Columbia. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Anderson, your closing statement.
Well, I'm grateful to the citizens of District 103 and to the citizens of the state of South Carolina for affording me the privilege of serving in the State House of Representatives for the past 10 years. We have worked very hard to do the things that is needed for our area. We're not going to say that we have satisfied everybody, because if that was done, then, hey, it would be a miracle in here. But because we have put in legislation, we have passed legislation, we have worked across the aisles, we have a personal touch with some of the lobbyists in Columbia, we have the the authority to go to the offices of those directors, we can lead the people of Senate District 32 to higher heights, to gain some of the things that they desire to have throughout their communities. And yes, it's Georgetown, it's Williamsburg, it's Florence, it's Berkeley, and it's Horry County. Those 5 counties are included in this Senate district. The same thing that I have done for Georgetown, Williamsburg, and Horry, I will launch out and do the same thing for Berkeley and for Florence County. Because of my ability to sit at the table and work very hard, because of the millions of dollars that we have brought to the area, and some folks don't see it, some folks don't understand it, but there has been millions of dollars that we have brought to our area. And guess what? The libraries that you see now, the things that you see, the infrastructure that you see now, it just does not happen along the way. We made sure that water and sewer has been brought to several areas in Georgetown and in Williamsburg counties, and we're working towards that happening in Berkeley County also. Those areas that are in dire need, when they call, we respond. So it's all about state government, and I think some people may need to realize that when it comes to state government, we've got to first see what happens on the local level. You have your local government, your county government, your city government that is supposed to take care of your local needs. Then it steps up to the state. The state... All right, thank you.
Mr. McKnight, your closing remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. Joseph. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard a lot tonight. And you all have a decision to make on September 2nd. You have 4 choices. I'm glad that 3 of them are here, but you really have 4 choices. Now you can choose someone who will tell you about their 20-something years of service, but don't have anything to show for it, except for the fact that they voted to block broadband back in 2001 in House Bill 3085. That they believe, and I'm speaking about Representative Sad, that the way to fix our infrastructure is to increase the gasoline tax and to implement toll roads. And you can also, and I'm also talking about him when you have to look at your Santee Electric light bill and know that he was the attorney for Santee Electric when they gave themselves $100,000 apiece on their board. Now let's be real about this. Yes, what you see is what you get. And I'll tell you what you'll get from me. You'll get someone who's not afraid to fight for you. You'll get somebody who is one of you who hasn't forgotten what it's like to be from District 32. You will get someone who will do what's necessary to help you in any way. Ladies and gentlemen, if they had such leadership, they'd have stepped up when I ran the first time. Therefore they did. Because now, when it's safe and they can't lose their house seats, now they're here ready to take the lead on the race that we began. But that's not going to happen on our watch. September 2nd is our time. You had your chance and you didn't take it. It's time to sit back. I'm willing to work with you, but it's not your time now. It's